Hello, trumpet players. In this video, we're going to talk about practice technique and specifically how to stop floundering. So there are a lot of people who their whole concept of practicing is to just try to get it right. I've done videos about this before. That's the worst way to practice. It's by far the worst way to practice. So let's talk about how you stop floundering. What is floundering? I also call it jumping around, right? So you work on the beginning a little bit, then you get like 4 or 5 bars into it, you work on that, then you try it all together and you realize that the beginning wasn't good enough, so you work on the beginning again. Then you try to put it all together again, and maybe you get to bar 8 this time, and then you realize that bar 4 wasn't as good as you would like it to be, so you start working on bar 4 again. And then you get a little frustrated and you look at the end because, well, maybe the end, maybe you need to look at the end. What's wrong with that picture? When you practice like that, it sets up a scenario where you don't trust yourself. Think about what I'm saying. Why did you go back to the first measure? You're going back to that first measure because either you didn't learn it right in the first place, or you don't trust the work that you did to learn it. Both of those are not good. So how do we fix that? That's what I call floundering. That's what I call jumping around. Floundering is the process of jumping around like that in your practice session. That's not good. You know, there's a rock climbing thing. I don't rock climb, but I'm fascinated with it. And I watched a video and they were talking about how you never move more than one limb at a time. So if you have like 2 legs and one arm set, then you can move the other arm. If you've got 2 arms and one leg set, then you can move the other leg. This is how we should be practicing. So before we talk about how to stop, how to, properly practice, we need to get rid of that. What you guys are trying to do when you just jump around like that is let all of your limbs loose at the same time. Nothing is set. So here's rule number 1. This is not the process. This is just a couple of rules for you to follow. Okay? Rule number 1 is to not move on until it's done. Well, you have to break your practicing into steps. Don't move from step 1 to step 2 until step 1 is finished. That's important enough to say it again. Don't move on from step 1 to step 2 until step 1 is finished. Now let's talk about the actual process and the rules of how to practice properly. Number 1, know before you start practicing what you're going to do. Know before you go. Okay? When you sit down to practice, if you don't have an objective, you won't get anything done. Just spending time on the horn, I like to talk in terms of familiarity. And yes, spending any time on the horn will give you some familiarity. But when you start comparing different levels of familiarity, I like to think of familiarity as levels of snow that, like in Antarctica, right, where the levels of snow pile up on each other. But some years of snow are smaller than other years of snow. It's the same thing with familiarity. Some familiarity is only that thick, whereas other familiarities might be that thick. Does that make sense? In terms of speaking in terms of layers of familiarity. And just sitting down on your trumpet trying to get something right is about that thick. When you know what it is you're trying to accomplish, it makes all of your practice time much more productive. So that's number one. Know what you're going to do, and the more detailed that knowledge is, the greater your benefits are from doing that practice, right? So, for example, you might say, today my objective is to learn this composition, this piece of music, this etude. Okay, that's fine. What if there's one part of that etude that you're having trouble with? Isn't it better to say, my objective for this practice session is to fix whatever's wrong with that part? Now you're getting even a bigger, fatter layer of familiarity. So that's step number one. Know what you're doing before you do it. Have a plan, have an objective. Step number two, do the plan. Use some sort of proven practice technique to accomplish that goal. When I say proven practice technique, it doesn't necessarily have to be proven to the outside world. But that's where we like to start, isn't it? Because if someone else used that technique and it worked, then it's probably going to work for you. The only way it wouldn't work is if you're using the wrong technique, right? So, for example, if the idea is that I need to learn this etude in the next hour, then I like to use working backwards, even though that wasn't originally taught to me as a way to learn new music. It works beautifully as a way to learn new music. It's just as effective learning a new piece of music as it is memorizing a song, which is usually how you would use working backwards. And I have a new modified version of working backwards that I call binary backwards. Okay, so that's a little different from the traditional backwards, but yes, I still do working backwards. But that's a proven practice technique. It doesn't have to be working backwards. And I think the new version of that, they call it chaining or chain linking or something like that. It's basically working backwards. Except with chain linking, I think you can start anywhere and work out from there, or start at the beginning and work from there. I'm not a big fan of working at the beginning. We won't go into that now, but if you're practicing from the beginning, you're not getting the best out of your practice time. So anyway, let's move on. One of these days, I'll make a video about working backwards. But yes, you should have some sort of practice technique to fix the problem. I invent techniques all the time because not every tool is right for every problem. And so now I have a collection of techniques that I use depending on the problem. And I teach these techniques to the students. And yes, you know what? It's a surprise to me how few of these techniques there really are. In fact, if you go on Google and type in practice technique, The first few pages don't have any. It's mind-boggling. But if you go on Google and practice and type practice technique, click enter, the first few pages have silly things like make sure your room is comfortable, um, silly stuff like that that really has nothing to do with practice. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. Use your favorite pencil. I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about the actual, how do you actually work on the music? When I'm talking about practice techniques, I'm talking about the nuts and bolts of what you have to do to get the music learned. And a lot of people, I even listened to a podcast about practicing. And the whole podcast never once mentioned anything about a practice technique. How can you have a podcast about practicing when there's no practice technique mentioned? It blows my mind. Anyway, I'm running out of time. Once you decide what the plan is to reach your objective, step number 3 is to just do the plan. And this is what I was talking about earlier at the beginning of the video. Every good practice technique has steps. Don't go from step 1 to step 2 or step 2 to step 3. Don't move on until you're done, until you're satisfied. And now, here's the last thing. This isn't actually a step. It's more of a rule. Don't go back. Trust what you did. Trust the work that you did. Don't go back. Going back is what screws everything up. And it's for some students, and I believe it's rooted in their lack of, what's that word? Not self-confidence, but the other one, right? The image they have of themselves is low. So they did the first step. But when they get to step 2, because their self-esteem, that's the word I was looking for, because their self-esteem is so low, they don't believe that they did a good job in step 1. Now, some people didn't do a good job in step 1. That's why we have the first rule. Don't move on until you're ready. And some people have the opposite problem. Some people won't move on from step 1 because they feel like they're never ready. That's a different issue. That's also just as bad. Okay? But the people who have such low self-esteem that when they get to step 4, they go back to step 1 because they think maybe step 1 just wasn't good enough. Don't do that. Don't do that. When 1 is done, when step 1 is done, it's done. Stop. That's what I mean by floundering. That's what I mean by floundering. Don't go back. Some people will use as an excuse, I don't have time. And it reminds me of of someone who I love dearly. I wrote a poem about him. I said, he doesn't have time to do it once. He doesn't have time to do it right. He only has time to do it twice. The idea that you don't have time to do it the way I'm saying it is a lie. A lie of Satan. Right? This is an evil lie If you don't have time to do it right, you do not have time to do it twice. Think of the logic of that. So, and if you don't have time, what is going back going to help? You know the sequence of events you have to do. Do that sequence. And what's there at the end of it is what's there at the end of it. You're not going to make it better by floundering. You're not going to make it better by jumping around. And at least this way, if you stop floundering, if you stop jumping around, at least you'll have something you can present when it's time to perform. Okay? I have 1 minute left. Let me get this turned off so I can teach. All right. Have a great week, and we'll see you on the next video. Thank you.